The National Desk, America's News, now.
Mr. Speaker, is there going to be a government shutdown?
No, we're going to work to prevent that.
Members of Congress are optimistic that they can stop the government from shutting down, but they only have 3 days left. What's at risk, as lawmakers argue? Then troubling new revelations about Boeing's culture as airplane safety remains top of mind for many Americans in light of recent dangerous incidents. And all eyes are on Michigan as the presidential primary polls close in just a couple of hours, a factor that could shake up the race a little bit on the Democratic side. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Right now, we are following severe weather threats crossing the upper Midwest to the Great Lakes, bringing heavy rain, wind, and a chance of hail. From St. Louis to Chicago, all the way to Detroit, there is a near 30% chance of wind gusts up to 74 miles per hour. The National Weather Service saying there is a near 80% chance of a tornado watch in the Chicago area. That is expected to stay in place until 11 p.m. tonight. We will be following the developments of this throughout the night. You can always stay up to date 24/7 on thenationaldesk.com. You can join us for the late editions of the National Desk. Just check your local listings to see when it airs in your city. And tonight, optimism growing for Congress to avoid a partial government shutdown before Friday. Senate and House leaders met with the president today at the White House for a, quote, frank and honest discussion about each side's top priorities. But despite agreeing on the need to continue funding the government, Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer differ on what should come first.
We're very optimistic. I hope that the other leaders came out here and told you the same. We believe that we can get to agreement on these issues and prevent a government shutdown. The first priority of the country is our border and making sure it's secure.
There's a logic to solving the border. We want to solve it. But we have to do Ukraine right now because there's a weight that can get done quickly because that has broad bipartisan consensus, and the border takes some more work.
But with time running out and just days to go before the first funding deadline, even slight differences could make it hard to get a bill to President Biden's desk, making a pure government funding bill more likely to proceed.
If we don't want to have a bunch of earmarks, if we don't want to have a bill that we've never had the opportunity to read passed, then the only way out of this is a CR through the end of the year and then start the budget process for next year.
This week marks 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine and the U.S. and its allies imposed sweeping sanctions meant to undermine Russia's economy and military. They haven't been as punishing as many thought, and a group of senators is starting to investigate why. The National Desk's Atra El-Nashar explains why they think a group of U.S. companies is indirectly helping Russia.
The use of American technology undermining America's foreign policy. Despite export controls and sanctions, American-made semiconductors have been found in Russian weapon systems on a massive scale. The Senate Intelligence Subcommittee on Investigations now looking into how and why, focusing on a handful of the biggest American chip makers, Intel, Texas Instruments, AMD, and Analog Devices.
They're sophisticated multinational companies that have controls over processes, but when you're manufacturing in places like China, it gets pretty difficult.
Their chips potentially getting into Russia through countries not subject to restrictions, like Armenia, Finland, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Turkey, according to a committee memo. Between January and October of last year, $351 million worth of battlefield goods from Intel were imported by Russia, according to a report by the Kyiv School of Economics. Intel tells us they comply with export regulations and sanctions and actively and diligently works to track and mitigate potential distributor issues and has zero tolerance for circumvention of its requirements. Subcommittee Chairman Richard Blumenthal tells us they're just starting to have conversations with these companies, as well as sanction enforcement officials at the Commerce and Treasury departments. There's no time to waste in a now 2-year war. Ukraine, without renewed aid from Congress, is losing territory, retreating from the key city of Avdiivka last week.
It's been 2 years. Why is this conversation just happening now?
I think that we are just becoming aware of how lethally ineffective our export controls are, how our sanctions are a sieve.
Another concern senators have is that other adversaries, North Korea, Iran, China, are watching how Russia is getting around these sanctions and creating a playbook of their own.
I think they see this as perhaps an easy path to go around export control.
Now, the fear is this could undermine U.S. strategy worldwide for years to come. Amira?
Atra, the White House continues to urge House Speaker Mike Johnson to bring the Senate-approved foreign aid package up for a vote. The administration also making news about what could happen without more U.S. aid to Ukraine. What exactly are they saying?
Yeah, we heard some more detail about that today. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says that if Ukraine continues to go without renewed U.S. support, in a matter of a month or two, he says it's very likely that Russia's military will gain even more territory in Ukraine, mostly in the eastern part of the country, though he said it's also possible in the southern part of the country. House Speaker Johnson, under pressure from conservatives, is refusing to hold that vote without the Senate accepting drastic changes to U.S. border policy.
Huge implications going forward. Antral Nashar reporting in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you. The FBI investigating who sent an email bomb threat to an employee at the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. That's the same school where a mass shooting happened just a year ago when 3 students and 3 staff members were killed. We are learning from the police today that they cleared the Brentwood Hills Church of Christ, where Covenant students were in class yesterday following that threat. It is unknown if the 2 incidents are related. Boeing's safety culture is, quote, inadequate and confusing. That's according to a new report from the FAA as they continue to evaluate the manufacturer's operations in the wake of last month's troubling door plug failure. The panel found, quote, a lack of awareness of safety-related metrics at all levels and a disconnect between Boeing's senior management and workers. Boeing says it's taken important steps to foster a safety culture, but that there is, quote, more work to do. Tonight, the former divorce lawyer for Fulton County Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade saying he cannot remember when Wade's romantic relationship with District Attorney Fani Willis began. The timeline of that relationship critical and under the microscope right now as a judge tries to determine whether there may be a conflict of interest in the Georgia election interference case in which Willis and her special prosecutor Wade may be benefiting financially from the case. If Willis is disqualified, we could see the Georgia election interference case get delayed until after this year's November election. Closing arguments on the matter are expected on Friday. Florida's Republican-led legislature is pumping the brakes on a bill that would have allowed wrongful death lawsuits over fetuses. The bill was slammed by abortion rights groups who argued it was just to scare doctors who perform abortions and could leave providers hesitant to provide IVF. The Republican chair who introduced the bill and then sidelined it tells Politico there is still work that needs to be done. On the national level, Democratic senators are introducing a bill to protect access to IVF after the Alabama Supreme Court ruled frozen embryos should be protected as people. They want a unanimous consent vote as early as tomorrow. For Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth, the co-sponsor of the bill, it matters. She had 2 daughters via IVF. Under Alabama's ruling, her doctor's decision to discard her non-viable embryos with her consent could be considered manslaughter.
So it's a little personal to me when a majority male court suggests that people like me who are not able to have kids without the help of modern medicine should be in jail cells and not taking care of their babies in nurseries.
3 people have been arrested in the death of a man on a New York City subway last week. 45-year-old Bronx resident William Alvarez was shot and killed on Friday after arguing with one of the suspects. Law enforcement officers found the 3 suspects at a Bronx apartment yesterday. They are charged with murder and criminal possession of a weapon. For the first time in nearly 5 years, immigration has taken the top spot as the most important problem facing America, according to surveyors of a new Gallup poll out today. And the change is causing some politicians to make major political pivots. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins.
Venezuelan gangs, increasingly a problem for NYPD. A violent criminal organization called Tren de Aragua recruits illegal migrants who arrived in New York City.
It is a right to live in this city, and you should be not committing crimes in our city.
The problem spurring New York Mayor Eric Adams to make a drastic political pivot.
We need to modify the sanctuary city law that if you commit a felony, a violent act, we should be able to turn you over to ICE and have you deported.
If these changes proposed by Adams had already been in place, ICE could have deported the Venezuelan illegal migrant Jose Antonio Ibarra before he left New York City for Athens, Georgia, where he's charged with the murder of 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley. Ibarra had previously been arrested in New York City for child endangerment, but was released.
Our country let this woman down. Unfortunately, though, as I said, she's not going to be the last. What more do we need as a nation to stop the chaos and lawlessness at our border?
This comes as new Gallup polling records a record high 55% of Americans see illegal immigration as a critical threat.
More unidentified migrants in this country can often mean more crime. We need to know who is here.
The same poll also finding Americans are most likely to say immigration is the most important problem facing the U.S.
President Biden and former President Donald Trump will both head down to the border this Thursday as they attempt to show voters they're the one most equipped to address this crisis ahead of November's election. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Okay, Kayla, thank you. Coming up, Michigan voters flocking to the polls for the presidential primary, why some Democrats are urging others in their party not to vote for President Biden. Then why the U.S. Army is planning to reduce its workforce by as much as 5%. And later, a closer look at recent arguments over the complicated intersection of social media and free speech. We'll be right back. All eyes on Michigan. Polls for the 2024 presidential primary closing in less than 2 hours now. President Joe Biden, of course, the favorite to win tonight's Democratic election. But that hasn't stopped Democratic critics who are advocating for a vote against him, asking would-be Biden voters to instead vote uncommitted because of his support of the war in Gaza. Organized by the state's large Arab and Muslim community, the vote is expected to stand as a clear sign of protest to Biden's support for a military campaign that hits very close to home, particularly for the state's Palestinian American population.
Right now, thousands of Michiganders are watching overseas, their loved ones dying, children starving to death, and they're hearing the screams of parents who are holding their children, their lifeless children. what right now we're hoping to push the president on is secure a ceasefire now. And
meantime, no full stop to the war seems to be in sight, though a temporary pause is on the table. New tonight, a look inside a new truce draft proposal by Israel that's now being evaluated by Hamas. According to reporting by Reuters, the first stage of the deal would include but not be limited to a 40-day pause in fighting, a ratio of 1 to 10 for the exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinians held in Israeli jails, and a commitment of 500 trucks of humanitarian aid per day. It's unclear at this point if Hamas will agree to these terms. And the hits keep on coming for Sean Diddy Combs. Tonight, we are learning another person has come forward to file a sexual assault and harassment lawsuit against the hip-hop businessman, this time coming from a male, a former producer and videographer who says he was sexually harassed. This is the fourth civil suit filed against Combs since November of last year. Combs has thus far denied all the allegations. The size of the U.S. Army is getting cut by as many as 24,000 positions. Calling it a restructuring as opposed to a reduction, the Army is eliminating as much as 5% of full capacity staff, but the plan looks to remove already empty positions instead of getting rid of active duty soldiers. And the new plan comes as the service struggles with recruiting shortfalls that made it impossible to bring in enough soldiers to fill the jobs. Under its current structure, the Army can have up to 494,000 soldiers. Under the new plan, a fully staffed Army would be 470,000. Currently, the U.S. Army has 445,000 active duty men and women in service. 150 Macy's stores are going to close within just 3 years. That's including 50 in this year alone as part of a big strategy shift. The company announced the changes today while reporting a loss and falling sales last quarter. At the same time, Macy's will improve the remaining 350 stores with more salespeople and visual displays. It'll also open 15 new Bloomingdale's stores and 30 new Blue Mercury cosmetic stores. American consumer confidence is down. It measures how people feel about economic conditions now and in the next 6 months. The Conference Board's revised confidence index fell 4 points after 3 months of improvement. It reflects anxiety over a potential recession. The Federal Reserve now working to tamp down inflation without triggering a recession. Family Dollar has to pay a record $41.6 million for using a mouse-infested warehouse to send products to hundreds of stores in the South. The FDA discovered living and dead rodents, mouse droppings, and evidence of gnawing. The company pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor yesterday. Family Dollar and its parent company, Dollar Tree, now have to meet strict reporting guidelines for the next 3 years. Around 280,000 Toyota pickup trucks and SUVs are being recalled because there could be unexpected movements when they're in neutral without the brake. The recall covers certain Tundras, Tundra hybrids, and Lexus LX 600s made between the year 2022 and 2024, along with Sequoia SUVs made last year. Dealers will provide a free software update to fix the problem. Weight loss surgery is in high demand these days, especially for those who want to reduce chronic health problems. Medical reporter Liz Bonas shares one woman's successful journey.
School counselor Charnel Beese is quite the role model to her students. For more than a year, she's been on a weight loss journey and says it has really changed her life.
I ended up over 300 pounds, which I'm 5'1", so that is not healthy at all.
After years of struggling to lose weight, Charnel says she would look at pictures and recall
just not being comfortable in my skin.
So she made the decision to consult the team at Ohio's Journey Light to have what's called a sleeve gastrectomy surgery.
And it strictly just limits the amount of food that it takes to make a patient feel full.
In a surgery much like this one, Dr. Trace Curry removes up to 85% of the stomach. It does have risks of infection and healing, but it leaves a cylinder or sleeve-shaped stomach, not much bigger than a banana.
So that's it, pretty much 15 minutes, changed this lady's life.
You see, as Charnel now knows,
There's like a signal, your stomach is going, okay, you're full, but we've just gotten used to, like, we just keep eating until we're stuffed. And I see that now. I never saw that before.
Sure enough, by eating 3 to 4 smaller meals a day, look at this. Charnel is now down more than 150 pounds.
Hi, friends.
The real reward? Not only does she have more energy to continue to help students at Waynesville Elementary each day.
I love my family. I love what I do. But personally, I didn't love myself. And I love myself now. And I'm learning to love myself more.
We do have more information online about the kind of surgery Charnel had and other medical weight loss options. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Okay, Liz, thank you. Coming up, what one group in Pennsylvania is doing to help parents who are looking for alternatives to public schooling. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
To put this in perspective, in 2018, it was estimated that 8 million children had been born worldwide using IVF and other assisted reproduction techniques.
House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels introduced House Bill 225 in response to the state Supreme Court's recent ruling that a frozen embryo is an unborn child. House Bill 225 states that no embryo outside of uterus can be considered any form of personhood. This comes after State Senator Tim Melson, a physician himself, drafted a similar bill on Thursday. However, a draft of the bill says a human egg fertilized in vitro shall be considered a potential life, not a human life, person, or unborn child until successfully implanted into a woman's uterus.
Mark Parfit is the chair of the group trying to form the Nittany Mountain Classical Academy. He says that over the last 6 years, his group has been heavily involved with the school board races, and he says he feels there is a need for other schooling options.
During that time, we've had the opportunity to meet with so many families in the State College School District who say they would like some kind of alternative, that they are not happy with the curriculum and programming in the schools, and they'd like some kind of other choice.
He says they are preparing to apply to be a part of Hillsdale College's charter school program and follow their 1776 curriculum, which they say provides students with an American classical education.
A lot of parents are looking just for a more back-to-basics option. If you look at the number of families that have enrolled in homeschooling, it's increased dramatically. They are families who don't necessarily want to homeschool, but they feel they have no other option.
Monday, the United States Supreme Court heard arguments about whether Texas can stop major social media companies from removing users or censoring their content. The Texas law passed last year claims to protect free speech by stopping social media companies with more than 50 million users from censoring users due to their viewpoints.
Their theory would mean that even if you just want to lurk and just listen and see what other people are saying, they can kick you off for any reason at all.
States like Texas argue social media companies are violating their users' right to free speech. But the social media companies argue they too have First Amendment rights because they're private companies.
So part of the real debate and what makes it tricky is, are the social media platforms more like newspapers and television stations, or are they more like public utilities like an electric company or a cable company?
Well, coming up, how Taylor Swift's spokesperson is responding to claims that Swift's dad punched a photographer in Australia. We'll be right back. Taylor Swift's rep is pushing back after a photographer claimed her father threw a punch at him in Australia. Ben McDonald told police Scott Swift assaulted him on Sydney Harbor as the pop star left a concert after party. A Swift spokesperson said two people were, quote, aggressively pushing their way towards Taylor and grabbing at security guards. Police are still investigating what happened. The U.S. lunar lander Odysseus has sent back a few more pictures from the moon's unexplored South Polar region right there. The spacecraft, made by Intuitive Machines, is expected to die any minute now. A few days earlier than planned, it tipped over, unfortunately, and could no longer get enough power. But it was still a success, as it was the first privately owned spacecraft to land on the moon. So we'll celebrate that. Thank you so much for joining us here at the National Desk, and have a great night.